What is going on, Wake Up Warriors? This is part 2 of the Brooks Gibbs interview. If you haven't seen part 1, you want to make sure you go back because there's going to be some tie-ins there. And this will be here waiting for you when you get here. 2, make sure to subscribe wherever you are. I know you're going to get into life while you're watching this or listening to this, or when you get to the destination, you click it off. Make sure to subscribe now so that you get these weekly updates, because you're always like, man, I really want to listen to that podcast, but then you don't because you forgot. So do it now. All right, here's today's episode. Brooks, you got the mind just rolling right here. I'm definitely.
Well, I don't like people to feel like a victim.
No, I definitely. I'm 100% on that.
But
yeah,
we promote victimization in this culture. We promote.
What are some ways? Because maybe I'm misunderstanding it. What are some other ways that we are promoting victimization,
I mean,
especially
just,
for our kids?
Google woke.
Okay.
And
so you think woke culture as a whole is promoting victimization?
It is synonymous with victim culture.
I will say that from my perspective, woke culture focuses the focus is heavily on exposing people for doing something they didn't like, and not so much on education about why it wasn't liked or trying to understand perspective of the intent of the action.
Here's my point.
That's really interesting.
If objective harm was done to your body or property,
okay,
then let's right that wrong. But if subjective harm was done to your feelings or your emotions, tough noogies. Deal.
And so you're under the, I guess your guidance would be just move on.
Wiser than you were. Like, it's either you're going to try to change the harsh reality,
okay,
and live miserably and waste years, tears, and dollar bills, y'all. Or you can adjust to that harsh reality and thrive and look at that limitation as one of the greatest things that's ever happened to you. This is the winning mindset. This is resilience. Resilience is leveraging adversity for psychological growth. And there's no resilience without adversity. And so resilient people look for adversity and they lean into it. They want it. They are thankful for it. It brings out the best in them. And that's the opposite of the culture that we live in. Weak and sensitive. And
so maybe am I wrong, or not wrong, but am I misguided in understanding that I can be resilient and also want to not change someone's perspective, but also add to a conversation that might not, like, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. Like, can't I accept the reality while also trying to change it? So for instance, let's say, we've used it a couple times here today, like Martin Luther King Jr. during the civil rights movement. He accepted his reality, but also wanted to change the reality, not just for himself, but for generations to come. So where does that fit into place? It is, I can accept where I am while also wanting to change it for the next to come. And I think that's, for me, where I lose myself with quote unquote woke culture, is that it seems like a lot of pointing at, like, you're doing something harmful and hurtful without a lot of actionable items to help change that state. And so where is the difference? Because I do understand we don't need to be victims, but I don't think that
we all are victims.
We should just accept.
This is the message. We are all victims.
Yeah, for sure.
Life is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is suffering. And the better you are at accepting and leaning into the suffering, the more happy you will be and the more healthy you will be, right? The goal for happiness is, it's a pursuit, I suppose, but It's certainly not promised. I guess I look at the sociological statistics of the African-American culture before affirmative action or whatever those programs are. There's so many programs, and you'd say, well, there were a lot of people that were married, and now there's not so much. And there are, it seems like, if I look at footage, at least, and I'm sure you could find footage that shows suffering people, sad. But it seemed to me that everyone adjusted well to the harsh reality. Now, I don't believe in segregation. I don't believe in keeping people out of whatever. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't, but if I was a psychologist back then, I would have worked with young people and I would say, how can you view the harsh reality of the limitations that you face as one of the greatest, and not lie to yourself, but actually believe it, the greatest loads or pressures that's going to bring out greatness out of you? Pressure makes diamonds. How are you going to leverage this for your psychological growth? And, I don't mind if anyone fights for the weak. I think that's a great idea. And I think to keep it in its proper place, which is the courts, right? And maybe media, because that's one thing Martin Luther King Jr. was absolutely genius about. He knew if he could not film the actual oppression, then he wouldn't provoke the conscientiousness of a globe
For
or
sure.
the United States. And so he understood PR. And but nonetheless, I would look at my kiddos, or I would look at the clients that I would have back in that day, and I would say, but even if it's not in your lifetime, or even if it doesn't get advanced, how awesome is going to be your life? And what do you want? Do you want to depend on others to take care of you, or do you want to take care of yourself? Do you want to get offended when you're rejected from a place, or do you want to be unfazed when you're rejected from a place and be able to pity them for their narrow-mindedness?
No, that I it's so weird because and maybe I'm missing it, right? So where I hear you is being the victim. To me, I really associate with that. I don't want to feel like, whether I'm the victim or not, that's not who I am. I feel I'm going to put myself in positions, whether I'm starting behind or ahead. I guess in this case, if I'm starting behind, that's okay. I can accept that. What can I do to get to where I want to be, right? But
And
the
by the
I
way,
good.
when we talk on the individual level,
Okay.
everyone is in agreement.
Okay.
When we talk about a macro level, a
Yeah.
cultural, a people group, a suffering population, everyone divides. And so
And so that's I guess that's where I'm trying to understand it better, is I completely understand. Maybe I've had it worse. No, I've had it worse in my viewpoint than some others, but that's not here nor there because I have to deal with the cards I've been dealt. However, I still may want, let's say, my daughter to have a better set of cards. So where is the difference between it
she
not being a victim yourself while also making sure or trying to change the, I guess, reality for the next to come?
Yeah. So I would say what's more important for my child is that she doesn't have the mind virus.
Okay.
And the mind virus is she's a victim
Got
and
it.
she is not capable of achievement because of the hardships of other people that they have placed on her.
Okay.
And I would say, no, anything I can do to cure you of your victim mindset and to give you the skills to refuse when you are a true victim. I mean, true victim, like God forbid, you get hit by a car and that's from a drunk driver and you now are paralyzed. Like my wife's a quadriplegic, all four limbs are paralyzed. And you look at that situation, you're like, oh no, this is horrible. You're a true victim. Yeah. But you know what was so attractive to me about my wife? I would ask her stuff like, oh, this is so sad. She says, no, I could be blind. I think that would be a worse disability to deal with. I'm so thankful that I have my eyesight. That was attractive to me. And I was like, well, is this forever? She says, well, this side of heaven, it's forever, I guess. But the other side of heaven, I'm going to have a new body. She was a person of faith. She knew that this was a temporary problem.
Mm.
And then I said, wow, well, I just feel so bad for you. She says, no, don't feel bad for me. I get great parking. I get on the front of roller coaster rides.
Got it.
Like I'm a built-in stroller for my future babies. Like I can pile groceries on the lap. Like she just sees the upside to every letdown. She refused to identify in
Got
her
it.
spirit level as a paralyzed, helpless, oppressed victim, although she
And
was a true victim.
was that a
She's not
drunk
a
driving
chronic
accident?
victim. What's that?
Was that a drunk driving accident? Because you said
No,
drunk
she was
driving.
a gymnast, but I realized that while I was giving the example of a drunk driver
I
in
get what you're saying.
paralysis, I got a wife who's paralyzed.
No, I get what you're saying. Because the reason I asked is because my question was going to be, is she an advocate for like maybe not, is she an
Yeah,
advocate
she
for?
could be if she wanted to. Like her dad died of from a drunk driving accident, so
Okay.
she could, and many times, by the way, that is to our benefit. The worst thing that ever happened to me actually turned out to the best thing for me. Why? Because it gave me purpose. The pain
Facts.
that I experienced now made me sensitive to the problems in the world, and I'm going to help people with similar problems. So, so oftentimes a person who's truly cured of their victim mindset will tell you, and these are true victims, if I had to live my life over again, I wouldn't change a thing because I love the person I've become
That's funny.
because of the hard things in my life.
That's funny. Yeah, yeah.
Anything I can do to cure a child from their victim mindset, I will
Got
do.
it.
And all I see as far as the fruit of entitlement programs
Hmm.
is the human tendency to identify and maintain that identity of an oppressed victim that can overcome. If you can do both and not have the mind virus of a victim, what the heck? Go for it. Fight for your cause. I don't care. But you're going to be victimized in other areas that you're never going to be able to right wrongs. I
Got it.
guarantee it.
No, and so a couple things that poked out to me, and that's why I kept asking and trying to kind of understand it better.
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we don't want to be obviously getting rid of the victim mindset. Maybe this is off, but accepting the situation that you're in, um, while also it is okay, however, to try and promote or uh, educate others to help avoid the same situation if it is avoidable. So, for instance, like the drunk driving accident, right? Like hey, this is my life. It could be significantly worse. However,
But that's
re-
objective harm to body and property,
got
and
it.
objective harm to, what I'm not in favor of is trying to cure the subjective harm where my feelings are hurt. And I think that's wrong. I think if an objective harm is keeping you from getting a job because of the color of your skin, then yeah, sure, I guess fight that. But
Got it.
I think an intelligent sociologist would look at the data and say, I'm not sure entitlement programs help people. I could say and make a good argument that it was the worst possible catastrophic thing to a particular people group. It is the road to hell that was paved with good intentions. But as a result, with this entitlement idea and this entitlement programs and the government now becoming sort of people being dependent on these government programs, it could have really destroyed a group of folks. And I look at, they tried to explain why are African Americans in prison,
Okay.
disproportionately. And you basically have two sides to that, to the answer. One would say, well, it's because there's discrimination and police brutality and people are profiling. And so that they're that, whatever. Or other people would say, well, because there have been a generation of unruly children that have not had a father in the home, whether they're black or white, but it seems to be disproportionately black. And why is that? Well, it could be because to have a husband in the home could maybe keep the mother from having the per diem or whatever she gets from the government. So she marries the government and the husband leaves the home and leaves the influence of the child. And you can't just write that off. You have to admit that two smart people are coming to the same table, two smart people that love African Americans, that
Hmm.
love them, but have a different interpretation of the data and the cause of the problem. I bend towards the mind virus because I see it not just in the American culture, I see it in Australia with the Aboriginals, and I see it with the Native Americans and the government programs that have destroyed their communities. And I view it in other people groups, not just the African American community. When the government creates entitlement based on a narrative of profound victimization that may be true, what happens is it develops a chronic victimization mindset that hinders a person from taking responsibility, oftentimes for their own feelings and their own problems and their own harsh reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives them an inability to adjust well to the harsh realities and take responsibility for their life. That seems to be the unintended negative consequences of many entitlement programs.
How does someone, so let's say, you mentioned the Aboriginals, the Black community here, the Native American communities here. How would someone who doesn't have access to like a U, how would someone then fight the mind virus?
Well, they don't need me.
But I'm saying like in other ways, right? So like
I'll tell you what.
if mom and dad already have it, right? And I guess grandma and grandpa probably gave it to them, but like we talked earlier about foundations, values, right? So generational conditioning, let's say, has created the mind virus. Would you say that's correct or incorrect? So then,
yeah.
So then, how then, without some type of intervention of either access to this information, does the mind virus change? Because I do obviously see outliers. You have outliers, but as groups, Aboriginals, Native Americans, and the Black community, what interventions then would you suggest other than just change the mind virus?
That's a great question, dude. It's a really good question.
Because I agree with, I really do agree with you, Brooks, that it is mindset. And that's why I look at affirmative action as a positive, because if someone were to get into college and be able to change, like you said, the 5 to 10 people around them, right? I think that changes their level of access, but also their perspective.
But so it's unfair for someone.
Oh, without a doubt.
Unfair for someone else. And so
I'm not disagreeing with that. I completely agree. And I think what it ends up trying to do is like, hey, for X amount of years, we feel like this was unfair. And so now we're trying to not right a wrong, but give access that could have been given, that you paid for, that now we're going to try and, make amends, right? Wrong, right, and different. I see the idea behind it. Without something like that at all, what would you say? What's that?
And I do too. I think,
and so
like the anti-bullying movement has good intentions,
facts,
but we don't really think about the negative consequences of those good intentions often.
So not just to those who are very smart and listening to this podcast with Brooks. And again, I really appreciate you stepping in because you're able to talk on such a higher level on these things, because this is what you've dedicated your listeners. What's that?
I bet I pissed off a bunch of your listeners.
But the thing is, so you know what, Brooks? Honestly, I hope they're pissed off. But I hope they look at why they're pissed off, and I hope they are at least allowed to like listen to your perspective. Because honestly, there's some things that you've said that I don't agree with, but also as I'm listening, I'm trying to figure out why I don't agree with them. Like at what level, right? Am I pissed off? It's super interesting because some of the things that we've talked about as far as resilience training, I'm starting to like, I'm already like, that's interesting. Why does that trigger me? Right?
I'd like to answer your question. There is no school of psychology that would endorse this concept of what I would call the mind virus, expecting others to solve your problem.
Got it.
The whole concept of psychology, again, is to empower the individual to scrape up what's left of them and to view their narrative as truthfully a positive, even though it's full of negatives.
Facts.
What doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Sticks and stones will break my bones.
But words will never harm me. Why? Because it's up to me whether a word will hurt. So I'm not going to try to police everyone's words.
I hear you.
Control society. So
I'm going to change how I perceive them.
I'm going to say, you know what? They can say whatever they want. It's up to me whether I'm going to take that to heart or not. And by the way, sticks and stones was invented in 1863 by the African American slaves to
Yeah.
empower their children to not be offended by racism.
Facts.
You
Yeah.
could look that up.
I did. Where do you think I got that from?
Before psychology, there was philosophy.
Yes.
Stoics said the same thing. They said it's not what happens to you that disturbs you, but your
Your reaction to
interpretation.
it. Yeah.
No, your interpretation. That means your evaluation, your
Mm.
belief systems that create your disturbances. So things don't bother you. It's your thoughts about those things that bother you.
Yes.
So get control of how you interpret even the harsh realities of life. So before psychology was philosophy, and they all say the same thing.
They're
And
solid.
before
No.
philosophy was theology, and every religion in the world tries to help people adjust to harsh realities. For me, it's a Judeo-Christian tradition. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Be exceedingly glad when you are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for great is your reward in heaven. This light affliction is but for a moment, and working in me a far and exceeding eternal weight of glory. And the suffering of the present time is not worthy to be compared to the joy that will be revealed in me. On and on I could go. Jesus,
My man had bars. He was just drop. I was like, okay. So essentially, you stole it all from theology.
in this life you will have trouble, but be of
Yes,
good
sir.
cheer. I have overcome the world. And why do you hear all the spirituals, the Negro spirituals, talking about on the other side of heaven, one day? Like their hope was in heaven, not in this earth. And the scripture teaches that. Don't put your eyes on things of this world. And by the way, the history of the world, most people have been oppressed by tyrants.
For sure. No,
and
I hear
used and abused like slaves. And so the freedoms that we have in America are so much better than what
100%.
the majority of the trillions of people that have lived since the beginning of mankind. We can count our blessings one by one. So they don't need me. They need religion or philosophy or psychology. They just need to learn.
How do you think that we implement that? Like, and I understand. Listen, Brooks, I really am not trying to have you save the world. I'm sure there's no answer that will fix it, or else we would do that. Somewhat simpler. I think this specifically, and I won't take up too much of your time. Man, I get with you, and I could listen and talk. Conversation with you truly takes me it takes me wild, man. I really
we're so
appreciate
different, and that's what I appreciate. We have mutual admiration, and that's the type of ironing, sharpening iron, right?
Yeah, for
We're two
sure.
dudes that really care about our family, and we want to do well, and we don't want to disturb our children, but we want to set them up for strength, not just physical strength, but mental strength. And
For
that's what this
sure. I
conversation
think
is
that
about.
mental
So
fortitude is
what's your
important.
question?
So it's more so with those groups, right? Without any interventions, what is the intervention that you think would help? I'm working on some things that I look at when I peel back, and I'm trying to implement and help. What are some of the ways that you think that we could influence some of these communities or these minority groups or those who, let's just blanket it, victim mentality, which is everyone, right? I'm sorry, not everyone has a victim mentality. Everyone's a victim of something, but those who have victim mentality, how can we help those groups? What
I think
I say intervention, but like, what is it?
I think it's learning to view your harsh reality as your greatest blessing and not
Okay.
want to change your harsh reality. And it's the three questions I asked: negative, neutral, positive. How could this have been worse? Why won't this matter in your future? How could this turn out for your good? Because when you have that mentality, you would say, if I had to live all over again, I wouldn't change a thing because I love who I've become. So it's a very simple thing.
When you're working with someone, how long does it take for them to accept that as like a mantra or a
Depends on
person?
how far the virus has gone.
Got it.
I mean, for those people, especially in minority groups who've been raised with a victim mindset, believing they are oppressed
Mhm.
and it's wrong that they were oppressed, and their grandparents and their great grandparents and whatever, and they're so poisoned that that sometimes I don't know if it's possible. They have to be so incredibly courageous.
I want you to take a second to explain poisoned.
So to attribute oppression as bad,
Okay.
it seems like a no-brainer. Yes, of course, oppression is bad. You
Got it.
shouldn't have people as slaves, or you shouldn't take their land, or you shouldn't pay them less than what they're worth and let other people be paid more. Like, that's wrong. I mean, that's a hard thing to overcome. And I would rather a person be able to say, yeah, but it is what it is.
Okay. All
And
right. So the poison is allowing that to control you going forward.
the poison is refusing to accept a harsh reality.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
And the remedy is to leverage the harsh reality to your advantage.
Okay. So to be super clear, man, I honestly asked you to define that because I semi understood what you were saying, but wanted you to clarify it for the person who heard it and is like poisoned, right? Like, and wasn't allowing you to not just be you, but wasn't allowing you to use terminology like,
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, if you look at like the Jewish community that had the Holocaust and the horrible
yeah,
Holocaust that it was, and who could ever say that it was a good thing? It absolutely was horrible. But you talk to actual Jews in Israel, and you say they would say this is what it took to provoke the conscientiousness of the entire globe to free up this land so that we could have our own state of Israel. And so we look back at the Holocaust in a memorialized way to be able to say, yes, the worst thing that ever happened to us turned out to be the best thing for us. And if we had to do it all over again, I mean, this is crazy to even talk like this, but if we had to do it all over again, would we change it? We wouldn't have our nation state. Or, how would we have the conscientiousness provoked? And it's just a foolish exercise in quantum physics to try to think of different realities happening. But be that as it may, healthy Jews will tell you we have scraped whatever's left of us, and we've realized the hardship has actually made us, and we are stronger because of it. And that's the history of the whole Jewish people, by the way, because Hitler was not the only one trying to take them out. You go all the way back to the Pharaoh, and perhaps even before that, but that's as far as I know as their history. The Herod tried to kill the Jewish people in ancient Israel. So there are the type of people that I want to be like are those who memorialize their hardships and say, that was hard, that was tough, that was difficult. But you know what? I'm proud of who I am, and I'm thankful for who I am. And I'm not going to demand that anyone changes what happened to me because they can't.
And so in those victim groups, or I'm sorry, those who have not yet accepted the victimization, you're saying that the negative, neutral, positive, having them exposed to that, kind of getting them to use that as a filter for some of the things that they're doing is
because it's what psychology, philosophy,
huh.
and theology teaches.
I really like that. I'm curious if there's a thing. You're like obviously, if I could have each person sit down with a Brooks Gibbs, and maybe it's something you already have or are working on. What is the downloadable Brooks Gibbs that I could implement that that I could send to somebody or have them.
If you want to teach your children these basic ideas, you go to raisethemstrong.com, and that has access to curriculum and videos and exercises. Are
those free or not free?
Those are, it's like $19 a month. I think there's some free downloads, but it's like $19 a month. It's like a membership thing that I have. And
the link to that is here in the description.
It works on children's frustration tolerance. And ultimately, that's the clinical term of what we're talking about. When frustration means blocked goals, when someone's blocking your goal, I want to get here, but they're in the way. Am I going to lose my freaking mind and demand that they stop blocking? Or will I go around it and say, okay, this is actually to my benefit. I'm going to have to be creative and think outside the box and go around it, because life is full of blocked goals. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care where you come from or what part of the world you live in.
What religion, doesn't matter.
Frustration is life. That's suffering. I don't want pain, but I do have pain. That's blocking my goals of not having pain. I don't want to die, but death is coming. I want to live forever, but I can't in this body. So That program, Raise Them Strong, hyper focuses on their low frustration tolerance, their irritabilities, their offendabilities. And it gives you exercises to expand their frustration tolerance, to raise it. So I have you poking at their skin for 30 seconds while they keep a smile. No pain, but just provocation. I
Mm.
have the other child chewing something noisy in their ear. It's basically exposure prevention. Exposure prevention response therapy is actually what the clinical validated therapeutic exercise is. You have to expose yourself to the thing that usually triggers you. And the more that you
Mhm.
do that, the less it has power to provoke you. And someone came over the other day and she's so afraid of snakes. And I said, let me find you a snake. We got to expose you to the snake. She says, oh, don't do it. I said, don't you want to no longer have this fear? Well, then you got to overcome it. And it's so debilitating. She's not willing to go into parks.
Were you
You
gonna
know?
pick up a snake?
Yeah. Spiders, snakes, whatever the heck it is. Like, you want to live limited? Do you want to have a law sign that the government's responsible to kill every snake and every spider that might be out there? Or do you just want to say snakes and spiders exist? I'm going to get close to them so they don't trigger me anymore.
Listen, I'm gonna let them exist over there. I'm not gonna.
Well,
I do hear
you're,
what you're
you're
saying,
the
though.
weaker for it, and it's okay.
Okay,
If
yeah,
you're
it's fine.
if you're okay
Yeah,
being afraid,
I'm okay being around a snake. I'm just not trying to pick up homie. Like I'm not like you know what I mean. I'm actually really okay with being around snakes, but the idea I'm gonna go pick one up to help someone else get exposed, bro. No.
well, if you were working with me,
Got it. I
I
appreciate
would
that.
say the next time you come in, there's going to be Sylvester the snake, and I want you to bring in your daughter because we're going to teach her and you how to face your fears
I love that.
and to let nothing in your life hinder you. Nothing. If you can control it, which you can in this case, then don't let it. Some things will hinder you, but you don't want unnecessary things hindering you.
Got it.
So I guess raiseemstrong.com is a good thing to go to.
Would that also be good for parents, right? So like one of the biggest issues obviously is yeah, we want the next generation to be a little bit more a little bit stronger, but the current generation is raising them. So I love how people are like this generation like yo, you raised us and we raised them. So it is not just in my opinion the kids, although like how is there something like raise them strong or is raise them strong also good for parents to use to help
Well,
their
if they're a parent, then I would say it's good for them too,
okay.
because you have to model these things.
Yeah.
Um, and I get that all the time. Thank you so much. This has really helped me. Hey, I think this saved our marriage. Our problem was we're so irritable with each other, always getting offended by each other, and you're helping cure our family of our offendability. And we're starting to reward resilience as opposed to achievement. And that seems to be a lot better for us. So again, when you reward achievement, you put this expectation that I must achieve so I can get a reward. Well, what if you
Mm.
lose well? So my kid I told him when he was playing baseball, if the ump calls a bogus call and you walk to the dugout with a good attitude, I'm getting you Hawaiian ice on Main Street in Safety Harbor. I'm going to reward that. But if you win the game, I'm not going to give you Hawaiian ice. Like, you won the game. Good job. I'm only going to reward resilience. You having an unfortunate, harsh reality happen to you
Mm.
and adjusting well to it.
And so the adjustment does that also like in the sports instance does that also make sure or help the it not being present at the next at bat?
Yeah. I mean, imagine if a child who gets a bad call at the
Hmm.
beginning of the game, the rest of the game, his shoulders are drooped because he's got a chip on his shoulder and he's now hates the ump because that's going to affect his game. His mindset of being a victim of
Hmm.
that guy not only creates retaliatory feelings to be mean to that guy, and if you're mean to that guy may have low frustration tolerance, and he may be saying, "What are you talking about? I'm a freaking volunteer, you little snotty nosed, pimply faced brat," And he may call on purpose, even though it's unjust. It's reality.
Yeah, for sure.
People are biased. Why? Because they feel victimized by
It's
you.
funny because in sports, I think about like a chip on the shoulder. You know what I mean? Like we hear about that. Like adversity, almost wearing it like, okay, you might be doing this, but I'm going to take it in my own hands. So, but it does make a ton of sense that if I can move on from something that I can't control quickly, not to take it into the next.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm not under any delusion that it can't be disappointing.
No,
I'm
for sure.
okay with disappointment, but it must be lightly held.
Like
Meaning
quick.
your desire of what you hope is lightly held,
Don't carry it for long.
as opposed to a demand. I don't have the ability to show you on this, but you just need to. It's okay to live life with desire, but be really good once your desire is not met to
Right.
adjust to the harsh reality that you're not getting what you want.
Oh, I love that. I think it was Alex Ramosi was talking about the idea that essentially what unhappiness is your expectation
Mhm.
being different than your reality. So if again, having, like you said, lofty goals and ambitions, being okay with the reality, even in pursuit, not
That's great.
allowing that difference to feel like you should have or should be here, but being happy with what you currently have while still
Right.
being in pursuit is the quickest way to quote unquote happiness or contentment.
Right.
He almost talks about happiness as an illusion. Like, be content with your current life while still in pursuit, and you won't be as sad or
Right.
hurt
Right.
if you're living in the reality, because the difference isn't a weight bearing down on you almost.
It's the power of gratitude. When you are
Hmm.
grateful, you could be happy in your present limitation and still have the desire for a greater potential. But even though you're here in your actual potential versus your preferred potential, you're full of happiness and joy, and you could actually be content. You could actually say, even if I didn't get my actual potential, it's okay. Like, I'm blessed to the max. So it's eyes of gratitude. How could this turn out for your good is the question that helps us realize I'm grateful for this. Even the bad stuff. Even the bad stuff. Yeah. So I don't, it's been said expectations are premeditated resentment. Expectations are premeditated resentment. You're about to resent the fact that you didn't get what you want. And I'm sort of a desire slaughterer. If I look at my life body of work, people say, oh, you speak against bullying. It's like, the reason why I'm like the number one anti-bullying speaker in the world is because what I teach is to accept the harsh reality that there's a jerk.
Extreme ownership.
Yeah. And just say,
Yeah.
take responsibility for your own feelings.
And I love how you said that, because I just heard a quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but essentially it's like regret lives in the past, and desire or lack thereof lives in the future, but peace lives in the present. Like, just, this is who we are, this is where we're at. And that, for me, that just hits so hard, because being in the present, allowing what is to is, while also pursuing, allowing what is, and understanding that things may change, but they may not. I think it's something that we haven't been taught or understand the importance of, but definitely, as I've gotten to, like you said, accept what is, while also understanding pursuing what I want is okay. It's such an
Yeah.
interesting
But even
difference.
that I would be careful with. I mean, I have sort of a radical idea.
Okay.
It's because I'm 42 years old, and I lived a certain way in my 20s and a certain way in my 30s. And at this point, I'm all about stewardship. I'm not about ambitious achievement.
Okay.
Whatever I do have, I want to preserve and protect and multiply
Mm.
in a way that's reasonable, that will not keep me from my real values, which is being a dad and being a husband and stuff like that. So, like, whatever I've been given, I'll try to steward, as opposed to like thinking grandiose, great things for myself. I want to be the number one. I want to have a New York Times bestseller. I want to have my own TV show. I want to do that. It's just your typical stuff that you get in your 20s and 30s. And you realize you're chasing all these like deals. And that's not, there's, that's
Which is
just
funny,
American
because like you are the
Western.
number. It's
I
funny because you are the number one speaker, and you do have a number one New York Times
This is
bestseller.
very
No,
interesting.
okay.
isn't that interesting? It's kind of like how life works. Those who want it most never get it, and those
Yeah.
who don't care about it seem to get it.
Yeah, but it sounds like you did care about it at one point, and then you got it, and you're like, no, it's
No,
not that
no,
important.
actually, I did care and I couldn't get it.
Okay.
My career crashed and I had 0 engagements.
Okay.
No one cared. And Jill says, why don't you just put out a couple of your videos like online and maybe we'll get a gig or 2 in Florida. And I said, okay. So I targeted and I started putting together some videos, and then it was like, boom, I was a global thing. So it's almost like Jesus put it this way: unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it cannot flourish. And it's not just Jesus who had that brilliant idea. It's like, it's sort of how life works. The power of negotiation is that you don't need it and you could walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes you so attractive. That's what attraction is, by the way. Women know this. If I'm too easy, he's not going to want me. But if I'm hard to get, I become all of a sudden like the most important thing to him in a challenge. Like, what is that? I don't know. But what I do know is godliness with contentment is the formula for great gain. That's a Bible verse. Godliness, I'm just going to work on myself. With contentment, I'm going to be happy with where I am. Well, when I just do those 2 things, I skyrocket into the advancement. It's also meekness. Meekness inherit the earth. I'm not going to try to, go crazy and demand all these things. I'm just going to have my ambition under control, my strength under control, and then people start advancing me because I'm not freaking obnoxious. I'm not an opportunist.
I saw a quote recently that was about detachment, and it said, detachment is not ever wanting anything to own, but never letting anything to own you.
Yeah, right. And learn to admire, not acquire. Like, I can admire this person's success. I don't need to acquire their same success. Why can't I be happy for people? That's why covetousness and enviness, and these are all biblical virtues that are also philosophical virtues, which are now psychological virtues. So you don't need a Brooks. You need God. Frankly, at the end of the day, because here's what God does.
I hear you.
And we can close with this. Because God pacifies all of your anxieties. He's got the whole world in his hands. He is sovereign, which means in control of everything. Nothing will happen to you unless he approves. And if he approved it, he'll bring you through it. And you could trust him. It's better to trust in him than it is to put confidence in man. Certainly don't have confidence in yourself. When you could lean on God, when you could trust him with your life, he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And you're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he prepared beforehand that you might walk in them. And precious are the thoughts that you think towards them. Great is the sum of them. If you could count every precious thought, there'd be more than sand on the seashore. And
you sound like Eminem. Go ahead, hit it. No, I'm about to drop a beat on this.
I'm like a C-level carnival version of Eminem.
Rap. I'm rapping, dropping bars. Brooks.
No.
Hey, Brooks. I really appreciate you coming on. To end the episode, I will ask you just some rapid fire questions. If you can, if you're okay with kind of answering the few things that come to mind, I would really, really appreciate it. Just some things that came up, some things that through the interview and others. The first one for me is like, what are the 3 things that people ask you? And if you haven't answered them here, like what are the 3 of the things that people constantly ask you, and the answer to those things if you got them?
Yeah, people say, why aren't you asking the bully to change?
Got it.
And I would say, because the bully identifies as a victim, and I am asking him to change. So when I speak about the victim mindset, I'm speaking to both the one that seems like the obvious victim, and I'm also speaking to the one that you're calling a perpetrator or labeling bully.
Hurt people.
Because they feel like a victim. So you victim-proof students, you bully-proof schools. That's probably, as far as 3 go.
No worries. I really like that. We can move on.
Yeah, move on.
What are the things, what are some of the things that you feel parents aren't asking, whether it be to their kids or aren't asking you, like things that would be super helpful with either helping themselves not be bullied or helping their kids? But what is one, let's not even go through it. What is one of the things that sticks out to you that parents should be asking or be thinking about?
Is this the way I would like to be parented?
Gibbs, you have no idea how much I love that one, because when I deal with parents, I ask them that sometimes, and it's the blank stare of, I know, but I'm the parent. Ugh, it frustrates me. And I mean, I really don't care at the end of the day, but knowing how I
You
was as a
care
kid,
about helping people,
man.
and it's a bummer for you to see that they can't seem to get it. But yeah, put yourself in that little kid's shoes, and what he wants is unconditional acceptance. He doesn't mind that you don't approve, but he does care about your acceptance. And so to merge his behavior with his person and condemn his person because of his behavior, that is wounding him on the soulical level,
Mm,
as opposed to saying, I love you, flaws and all.
wow. And then, uh, what would you say to a kid or a parent who feels they have to be liked?
Well, as long as you want to continue to suffer, continue to have that point of view. But the second that you want to stop needlessly suffering, be happy with who you are and how you are, and stop living for the approval of other people.
And then last but not least, I'm going to challenge you here, which probably is not a big challenge because you have all of the things to wrap it them. So you said, what does that kid need? And that kid or that parent, and you said God. Now, for someone who is not currently with faith, or, it actually is even going to church, but maybe doesn't feel that's the way, I would say or ask you to give us an option B, right? Like if someone says, I'm out on God, you mentioned a few other things that could be similar or had similar tenets. What would be your option B to the person who right now is listening and saying, God's not going to be the route I go, so it's not for me? What would be the option B for personal exploration of some of these?
I would say I have no option B.
So not some of the other like Stoics or psychology or books, or there's not an other like a gateway drug that would
It's
go
everything
ahead.
else is counterfeit. Everything else is band-aids. Everything else is a simile, a like or as of the original thing. And if I'm going to be a real, authentic communicator of where the medicine's at, I would say God loves you, and he proved it through Jesus. Fall in love with that God, the God of the Bible, and you will have incredible healing, psychological healing, and all these other things will fall into place because of what God provides you in a relationship with him. So I know that's frustrating. I know it's like not ideal, but it's like you're not going to get a plan B from me.
Got it. So now just this will be the last question, I promise. When you're working with people, is that a foundation of your, like if I were to hire you, is that like the foundation of what?
I speak 90+% of my stages are secular public schools.
Got it.
So, I'm teaching them something that's biblically based, psychologically sound, culturally relevant. And so the foundation of everything that I teach is from scripture. But I don't quote chapter and verse, but I teach them basically what the Bible says, that philosophy has confirmed, that psychology has now validated, that your irrational demands that you make toward yourself, others, and life are the source of all your angst. And so give up the grip of your demands of how yourself or others or life should be,
Hmm.
and accept and appreciate what is. And when you do that, you'll suffer less.
And is
It's
there
not
anything that you
it's
would
not the
say?
cure, but it's a band-aid. It's a pacifying remedy.
Is there anything that you would say that would also be culturally relevant that someone could dive into and get some of the same tenets that you're, outside of just your stuff, some of the cultural tenets without maybe stepping into or embracing religion for the first time?
I mean, the golden rule says nothing about God,
Okay.
but it's every religion in the world teaches it. And so an atheist can love the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. And in that maxim for living is both a social instruction to treat others and an emotional instruction. Consider how you would want to be treated. So treat others the way you would want to be treated. It's the first social and emotional instruction, but its roots are in the first time it was ever really written, I believe, at least in the positive, was in Jesus, what he said. He always was communicated in the negative. Don't do to others what you would not want done to you. But the affirmative is so much more powerful because it causes you to be the initiator, to be the change that you want to see in the world, and the world will reciprocate that same change. So I'm fine. I believe the Bible's all true, but not all truth is in the Bible. And if something contradicts the Bible, it's probably a lie. And that's kind of my approach. And it's totally
Okay.
bias.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't be a true scientist if I have that bias, but I've seen the utility of the healing and the psychological freedom that's released when you trust that there's a good sovereign God that knows your name, cares about you, and wants to dynamically work with you in this life with this problem now. Like, that's very powerful. And for someone not to live with that, I think, well, then what is your morals based on? What is your absolutes based on? You become a relativist, you're going to most likely become, what do they call it when there's no meaning? A nihilist, and nothing has meaning. And that's a pretty devastating way to live. If you take your thoughts, godless thoughts, to the end of the thought universe, nihilism is waiting for you. And that's not fun.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know about nihilism. I'll have to check that out myself. But I do want to thank you for coming in. And I mean, again, we talk forever, and we will continue if I don't stop us here today. And I appreciate you extending the time.
Yeah,
So I know that your time is valuable. Everyone who's watching on YouTube, please like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check the description because there will be some information that Brooks talked about throughout the episode, and you can find his book there. You can find his website there. Remind me of the website.
RaiseThemStrong.com.
RaiseThemStrong.com will be there as well.
Bullying.com.
And so all these great tools that will help us become better parents, teachers, and leaders will be there for you. If you're listening to one of the podcast platforms, please leave a nice little rating and review. And you'll also be able to find the things and the places that you can find Brooks there in the description. So just take advantage of all of those tools because my man's got some great, whether you believe everything he says or not. And I think that is so important, Brooks. Whether you believe everything he says or not, he does have gems. So don't lose sight of some of the great information that he does have because you don't agree with everything that he has. You can take the nuggets that maybe have changed your perspective or given you new perspective and dive into them even more. While also, you don't have to believe, but I really, really do hope that you give everything he said an opportunity to be true, do some self-exploration, because what the Wake Up Warrior podcast is all about is introducing new ideas so that we can do our own work and be open to change. Brooks, I really appreciate your time.
Hey, man, it was controversial, but it was fun. Thank you.
Who doesn't love that? Be well, man.
Be well.